Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the MMA Corner News Show. As we come at you every Sunday with the week's biggest news stories. I'm your host, Josh Davis, alongside my co-host for the day, Trey Downey, featured columnist at the MMAcorner.com. Trey, how you doing today, brother?
I'm good. It feels good to be back after a brief hiatus last week.
Yeah, we missed you last week, but it's one of those things. You know, we all have other things going on. With that being said, yes, MMA is life, and as that being the case, we have a lot to talk about today. Leading into this week, because there were the dual events and everything like that, the news that the UFC released or broke, however you want to term it, was rather slow. But there were still some big stories that came out. And you know us at the MMAcorner.com, we like to cover big stories. And right now, one of the big stories out there is Chael Sonnen. He just cannot stay out of the news. And honestly, I think that's just how he wants to live his life. He's certainly done very well getting himself there. And so now he certainly wants to keep it. However, the news that broke about Chael last week, not good news. We already knew that he failed drug tests for clomiphene and then for anostrozole, but it also came out that he failed a second drug test for human growth hormones and human it's EPO. I have to be honest, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, so I'm not even going to try it. But he failed a second drug test for these things, and to be honest, I don't think it was a second drug test. I think it was all in the same drug test. They just, recently released it. With that being said, Trey, let me ask you this. Chael Sonnen, how is he going to be remembered? Is he going to be remembered as a fighter? Is he going to be remembered as a trash talker? Or is he going to be remembered just as a guy who cheated his way to the top? What do you think? Give us your thoughts.
You know, it's so hard to tell right now. I think we're still living in the reactionary world of what just happened. I mean, the news of the second drug test and the HGH and the EPO broke last night during that doubleheader. And I mean, the UFC, they had all the time in the world to acknowledge it that on Fox Sports 1 and stuff like that. I mean, I can understand not wanting to take away from the fights that are going on, but it's something that has to be acknowledged. And the thing that really got me about this was Chael still came out and tried to justify it. I mean, give him credit for not denying it, for saying, yeah, I was on these drugs, but he tried to justify it as saying he still wants to help as far as, being able to transition guys off of TRT and stuff like that. But I mean, are you really needing to take HGH and EPO? Is that what you need to transition off of TRT and HGH? And the other drugs he was taking are clearly more illegal when it comes to that than the TRT was. And I mean, the first excuse was he was taking fertility drugs and stuff like that. Yes, that is probably a true statement, but this kind of throws that out of the water. I said a while back when the news broke of the first drug test, that I still didn't think we necessarily have seen the last of Chael Sonnen. Now, I mean, I don't know. The UFC came out and said they're going to support the commission and whatever they're doing, but you've got to think the UFC and Fox have got to have a really long sit down, because do you really want a guy like this? I mean, before the first drug test news came out, Dana White was saying, and people have said that, Chael Sonnen might be the guy that eventually takes over as the figurehead for the promotion if Dana White ever gets burnt out or decides to step down, as that type of thing. But with all of this, is this really a guy that you want as the face of your promotion, as the face of your weekly news show, as one of your biggest analysts? This is getting to the point where, during the World Series, if we're seeing Jose Canseco and Mark McGwire and Roger Clemens as the lead analysts, yes, they were great players in their time, but they're probably more remembered now for their drug use. I think that's unfortunate when it comes to Chael, because he did a lot of things for this sport, and he rose to the top, from relative obscurity. But this kind of, I mean, it tarnishes his legacy a little bit. I mean, I was kind of, okay when the first drug test came out, but this one, I mean, it's a big blow to Chael's legacy, and his future as far as it comes to being a broadcaster. I have to believe.
Well, you know, to be real honest, I think over time, people are gonna forget Chael's dealings with the commission, his failed drug tests, all that kind of stuff, and he's basically going to be remembered for all the trash talking that he did, and you know, his fights with Anderson. But his career as a fighter, you know, honestly, I don't think too many people are going to go back to, again, his 3 fights with Jeremy Horn or his days in the WEC or anything like that. You know, he is going to be remembered for talking his way into title fights, and all the stuff with TRT and the failed drug test. Here's my thought. I look at TRT very similar to a narcotic. You know, when these guys take it all the time and take so much of it, I have no doubts that they get addicted to it, that their body gains a chemical dependency on it. And so when you're stopping TRT, I don't know what the side effects are. You know, I don't know if it's like heroin where it makes you sick, or what the case is. I've never done it. I don't know anything about it. I'm not a doctor, but I do have a degree in behavioral science, and I do work with a lot of drug addicts, and I would think that the addiction to TRT is probably the same as anything else. And when you're trying to get off TRT or wean yourself off TRT, I'm sure you're using other drugs to do that. I highly doubt that anybody is just stopping cold turkey. It's just like when you quit taking heroin, they start putting you on methadone and other drugs to wean you off of it. So I'm not going to judge Chael because I don't walk in his shoes. For all I know, he is off of TRT, and part of doing that is taking a little bit of HGH and is taking a little bit of the EPO. I don't know, though. You know, it's all speculation. I have no idea. So based on that, I'm absolutely not going to judge Chael, and I think this area is so new that until we truly know the truth and the true facts about how this stuff works and what we need to do, I don't think any of us should judge. Now, moving on to a good point that you brought up about Chael's future, his career with Fox and possibly taking over the UFC and that kind of stuff. Here's the thing. Could he still be the face of the UFC? Absolutely. You know why? Because he can promote. People want to listen to his rhetoric. People love listening to him talk. Well, Dana White has never failed a drug test for steroids or anything like that. Dana White has definitely done some unethical stuff that people have questioned and are like, how the hell can this guy be running a major organization? It doesn't matter. What matters is, can you get people to buy into what you're doing and put butts in the seats? And Dana White is excellent at doing that, and I think Chael Sonnen would also be excellent at doing that. And trust me, I don't think Fox is going to get rid of Chael for doing this. Fox, yes, they are right-wing conservatives and that kind of stuff, but they have been known to put people on the air that have done some shady stuff and stuff way more shady than Chael. And if we just want to put Chael's whole life into perspective, him taking steroids, to me, is less than the money laundering, the fraud, and all of that kind of stuff that he was convicted for in Oregon with his real estate stuff. You know, if you truly want to look at the character, that, to me, outweighs the fact that he was trying to put something in his body to give him an edge as a competitor. I don't like steroids, but if my job depended on me fighting and there was something I could take to make me better, I would probably take it. If there was a pill that I could take to allow me to use 90% of my brain so I would be smarter at my job, I have to say, guys, I would probably take it. And I'm a moral person, you know. I live by a good moral code. But if there was something out there that's going to make me better, that's going to put more food on the table, that's going to help me pay for my daughter's college education quicker, all of that kind of stuff, I'm a human being. Absolutely, I'm going to at least consider it. You know, I'd be lying if I said that I wouldn't, because I think all of us probably would. Now, I'm not saying we would all take it, but to say that we wouldn't consider it, you know. So let's put things in perspective before we start chastising Chael. Now, he did some unethical stuff and some stuff that he's going to have to pay for, but as far as do I still want to listen to him analyze fights? Yes, because he's good at it. Do I still want to possibly see him take over the UFC? Yes, because I think he would be good at it. Do I want to see him fight anymore? No, because we know that he's not doing it on an ethical playing field. So that's where I sit with Chael Sonnen. Now, with all of that being said, trust me, guys, there is more news out there than Chael Sonnen. However, Chael would probably like us to believe that's not the case, but here at the MMA Corner, we do our due diligence, man. We do all kinds of research, and we have found that, yes, there is more news out there than Chael Sonnen. And this is one of the stories that does not have anything to do with Chael Sonnen, but is something that we need to talk about. So, what was it, UFC 174, Tyrone Woodley did not look good. He basically got handled by Rory McDonald. In my mind, did not show up to fight, because the true Tyron Woodley that we've come to know as a competitor did not show up to fight Rory McDonald. I don't know who that imposter was, but it wasn't Tyron Woodley. With that being said, he's getting his chance to redeem himself. Hector Lombard had to pull out of UFC Fight Night 48. Tyron Woodley quickly stepped in to take the fight against Dong Young Kim. This fight's going to take place on August 23rd in Macau. Is this Woodley's chance to get back into title contention? If he's able to go into this fight and just put a beat down on Kim on the stun gun, does that catapult him back into title contention, or did that loss to Rory drop him down so much that he's got to win a couple more fights before we start thinking about him as a contender again? Give me your thoughts, and then also give me your thoughts on this matchup, because I personally loved the matchup of Kim versus Lombard. Styles make fights, and I thought these clashing styles were going to be excellent. I was really looking forward to this fight. Do you think Woodley and Kim has the same appeal?
As far as Woodley goes, I just think in the end that he's still going to be, even if he beats Kim, I think he's still probably 2 more wins away from a title shot, because you've got Robbie Lawler and Matt Brown coming up, and they're going to get Johnny Hendricks, and then Rory. I mean, he's probably next in line to be in a number one contenders bout. A lot of people expected him to fight the winner of this Kim and Lombard fight, but now if Woodley goes in there and beats Dong Young Kim, I don't think we're going to see Woodley and McDonald again right away. I think ultimately this kind of hurts Dong Young Kim more than anyone else, because I have a feeling that Lombard's out with an injury, so I have a feeling that we're going to see Lombard like leapfrog over this fight, and I think we're going to see Hector Lombard and Rory McDonald booked against each other later this year in a number one contender fight. And even if Kim beats Woodley, I think that the fight is still going to be Lombard and Rory Mack. I think this is definitely a big spot for Woodley. We saw what happened to Jake Ellenberger when he faced McDonald last summer, and then people were questioning him and saw what he's going to do in his next fight. Then he went in there against Robbie Lawler, and it was a thing of the same. And now he's definitely slid way down the welterweight rankings. Welterweight is so competitive right now with some of the guys you've got in there. You've got Mike Pyle, who's making a run into the top 10. Tarek Safadine, we still haven't seen a whole lot of him since he's come over from Strikeforce. Last night, Kelvin Gastelum stays undefeated. You've got other young guys, Jordan Meehan, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Thiago Alves is back on the rise. So I think that performance by Woodley put him down the ladder some, and he's gonna have to really go out there and be impressive in Macau if he wants to get back in that top 5 in the mix type of thing. But I still think we're at least a year, maybe a year and a half from seeing Woodley in a title fight, and that's if he's very impressive in all of those fights.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think the loss to Rory McDonald really hurt Woodley's chances at any kind of title fight because this division is so stacked. And you mentioned a lot of great fighters, and you got to remember at some point Carlos Condit is going to
Yeah.
be coming back, and then when he does, where does he fit in the mix? So,
Well, Woodley beat Condit in his last fight, so I think he's still slotted above him a little bit.
you know, Woodley did get credit for the victory, but trust me, no one's giving him that victory. You know, so many people are still saying Carlos' knee blew out, all of that kind of stuff. Even the UFC truly doesn't give Tyron that victory. And so I do think that when Carlos comes back, I think the UFC is going to have, I won't say they're going to have him above Tyron, but what I will say is when Carlos comes back, he will have a quicker run to the title than Woodley does. Just personal opinion. Now, but again, he was just another fighter that you have to throw into the mix when he comes back. And so I agree with you. I think that the injury to Lombard was the best thing that could happen to him because now he is going to leapfrog that fight. And I agree. I think Lombard and McDonald is going to be the next major fight that we see. We'll probably see it. My guess would be sometime in October, maybe November, something like that. So I feel bad for Kim because, you know, if he does get this victory, yeah, it's a great victory, but it's, you know, just not going to do enough for him. And Woodley's in a bad spot here. If he loses this fight, he's going to, not only is he going to be at the bottom of the barrel, he's going to have everyone questioning whether or not he truly ever was legit. And then I'm going to throw this out again, just because we were just talking about Carlos Condit. If Woodley loses to Kim, I guarantee you that everybody is no longer going to give Woodley credit for the victory over Condit. Even though he does deserve it, the way that human beings work, they're going to take it away. They're all going to say, no, it was all because Carlos blew out his knee. Look what he did in his next fight. You know, that's just the way human beings work. But I will say this, I am looking forward to the fight, but I don't think it has the same excitement as Kim Lombard did for the simple fact that most of the meaning of the fight is taken off the table. We knew that the winner of Kim Lombard was going to get a serious title push. I cannot say the same about the winner of Kim Woodley. I just don't see it happening. Again, though, there are so many things going on in the world of mixed martial arts right now. We're going to move on to the next story. And this, I thought was the most interesting story of the week. And this is something that I was really excited about. And I'm really excited to see what the UFC does with this. UFC came out this week and announced that they partnered with Valley Judo over in Japan. They're going to start a reality show doing Valley Judo fighting, and the winner of that is going to be awarded a UFC contract. So what do you think? First off, this is a two-part question, Trey. What do you think of the UFC doing that? And then number two, do you think that the UFC is done with doing the Ultimate Fighter over there, and they're going to try and do some other type of reality shows to pique interest, or is this going to be something they do in addition to the Ultimate Fighter? What are your thoughts?
I think this, for right now, we're gonna see this as an experiment more than anything else. I don't think the Ultimate Fighter is going anywhere, no matter what people say that the format's gotten stale and things like that, that they don't produce contenders anymore. The fact that saying they don't produce contenders anymore is an absolute fallacy. The Ultimate Fighter 17, there's plenty of really good fighters on the UFC roster from that show.
Hold on, real quick. I just want to jump in on that thought. For people who are saying that the Ultimate Fighter doesn't produce contenders, didn't previous Ultimate Fighter and TJ Dillashaw just step up and beat the man, beat the crap out of the man, Renan Barão, and take his title?
And he didn't even win the show.
Exactly. Isn't that the definition of what a contender is? I mean, I could be wrong. I know I'm an idiot, so if I'm wrong, please get in here and correct me, everybody. But to me, that's the definition of being a contender. So I don't know what people are talking about when they say that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and as far as this format, it's going to be an interesting format to see how it plays out. But the fact that it's taking place over an 8-month period of time, I think that's the big caveat in that. I mean, I've already come out in serious, griping about how long the Ultimate Fighter takes now. We saw, I don't know if the UFC is going to plan to send fighters over there to coach this show or anything like that. I doubt that. But I mean, we've had the lightweight title on the shelf for, it's going to be a year and a half before we see it defended, because they slot these guys to coach on the Ultimate Fighter, and it just takes that long. And then if you've got guys who are in, smaller organizations and stuff like that, I don't think you're really going to see too many guys wanting to sign up to go on an 8-month reality show when you could probably get more notoriety and get more fights, make more money on the local scene, and probably just rise to the UFC organically instead of that. I mean, this format will probably work better over in Asia than it would here in the U.S. And I think that's why that the UFC is trying it over there. And maybe that longer format will help build a bigger star out of that show. But I don't know how evident that's going to be here in the U.S. I know the UFC says they put on shows for other countries and stuff like that. But if you're truly a global sport, then almost every one of your cards should still be for everybody. I mean, we saw last night in the card in San Antonio, Cesar Ferreira had a lot of hype coming from the Ultimate Fighter Brazil, but this is the first time I think that he's fought in stateside, and he's in third fight from the top, but a lot of people still don't know who he is. Has a great record in the UFC. So these reality shows, it's going to be especially the international versions. It's going to be interesting to see how these guys come up. It's an interesting format. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I still think the Ultimate Fighter in general is still a better format than people give it credit for.
Yeah, I love the Ultimate Fighter. I think the format is great. The one thing that I do agree with, I think it sucks that it takes so long. Because again, the show that we're watching now, I mean, filming for that ended 4 months ago. Exactly. And so it's terrible for these guys to have to do that kind of stuff. And our blogger, Cahal Pendrell, who I love to death, the UFC made him basically sit out of competition for a year so he could do the Ultimate Fighter. He knew he was going to be on the show, wanted to take a couple more fights in Ireland. They told him he couldn't do so because essentially if he lost, then it takes all his hype away for the show. So he sat out for a year, didn't make any kind of money, and I truly felt bad for this guy. And when obviously he's our blogger, and so we know him well, and to hear him tell his story, and he wasn't knocking the UFC or anything, he was completely happy to sit out, but he was just like, damn son, you try going a year without making any kind of real income, and see how you support your family. And Cahal's a very educated guy. I mean, he could have a very nice career in Ireland if that's what he wanted to do, but he wants to fight. And so I think I think the UFC moving forward will figure all these things out. And guys, even still, the Ultimate Fighter's been around for a while, but it's still in its infancy stages. Every season they do some kind of tweaks or changes to it, and I think moving forward we're going to continue to see them change it and truly make it perfect. And as far as the Valley Judo stuff goes, this is their initial shot at it. All right. If you look at the first 2 seasons of the Ultimate Fighter and then what they're doing now, it's completely different. Back in the first 2 seasons, the teams actually competed against each other. They had team challenges and that kind of stuff. And so things have changed, and where I'm going with it is this. What we see for the first season of the Valley Judo stuff probably isn't what we're going to see 10 years later. So you got to give them time to work it. Now, what I will say, though, is I think this is great because it gives us more fighters that we're going to be able to see. It's going to give us more styles, and again, styles make fights. This is how you continue to grow the sport and continue to keep it exciting and continue to make people evolve. You know how the sport evolved beyond Gracie Jiu-Jitsu? by getting all other types of guys in here,
Yeah.
teaching them Gracie Jiu-Jitsu along with everything else that they did know, and it basically took them a step above. And again, this is how you continue to grow the sport. So I'm excited. I'm stoked. I think that's great. Now, moving on. I am so looking forward to next weekend. Obviously this weekend's still here, and if I could extend this week so I don't have to work next week, I would, but I can't. So with that being said, even more so, if I could just fast forward to next weekend, I would be all over it. Great weekend next weekend. Trey, give us your thoughts on everything that will be next week.
It's huge. It's the biggest week of MMA in the year. International Fight Week. The UFC started doing it with a big fan expo. Other than the year-end show in Vegas, the 4th of July weekend show is always the biggest card. UFC 100 was the week after July 4th, because July 4th ended up falling on a Saturday that year. But it was a July card. Last year, Chris Weidman over Anderson Silva. The list goes on and on of huge cards, and we've got a UFC doubleheader almost next weekend. We've got you've got the big fight, Weidman and Machida, Rousey and Davis, the return of Stefan Struve against Matt Mitrione. I mean, it shows the depth of this card that you've got Uriah Faber and Alex Caceres, one of the more intriguing fights at bantamweight that we've seen this year, and they're fighting on the Fox Sports 1 prelim portion of the show. And then the next night we're getting Frankie Edgar and BJ Penn on at featherweight on Fox Sports 1 for free, when in the past we've had to pay $55 for that fight when we've seen it the first 2 times. It has even more intrigue this time with, BJ really wants to get the Frankie Edgar monkey off of his back. Even with Cub Swanson winning last night, this fight still has title implications. But, the thing that really intrigues me about next weekend that I'm really excited about is other promotions getting in on this, specifically World Series of Fighting down here in Florida. Saturday afternoon matinee on NBC. That's huge. We thought, how big of a deal was it when Elite XC got on CBS? It took the UFC forever to finally get on Fox, and then World Series of Fighting, in just their 11th show, is going to be debuting on network television on one of the biggest holiday weekends of the year here in the United States. Justin Gaethje, one of the biggest prospects in the lightweight division, against probably the best story in all of MMA, and Nick Newell. I can't lie, I'm more excited about it because I'm going to be down over in Daytona starting Thursday. You'll be able to cover all my coverage from the week here on the MMAcorner.com. I'm just really excited about that. The whole sport of MMA is just going to be huge, front and center next weekend, the July 4th weekend. It doesn't get much better than this when it comes to MMA.
No, it doesn't, and it's funny. The UFC and really all of MMA is starting to figure this out. We have Super Bowl weekend, which is the first weekend in February these days, sometimes the second, depending on scheduling. But it's all about football. The entire world knows about Super Bowl weekend, and so all the focus, the sports focus is on Super Bowl weekend. NASCAR, and you're in Florida, you're a big NASCAR guy, so you can probably speak better about this than I can, but Daytona 500. Specific weekend. It's their Super Bowl of racing. It's really the start of their season, but all eyes are on the Daytona 500. Everybody, whether you're a sports fan or not, everybody knows what the Daytona 500 is. My daughter, I'm not a racing guy. I mean, I do watch some racing, but it's not one of my top sports. But even my daughter, who's 4 years old, she knows what the Daytona 500 is. I mean, that's big stuff. MMA, the UFC specifically, has finally taken the 4th of July weekend and made it theirs. They have the International Fight Week, all of that kind of stuff. There's no other sporting events going on except for the race stuff that you have going on in Florida. But there's no other major stuff going on, World Cup, but again, that's every 4 years.
Yeah.
So they have done the smart thing. Boom. They have stolen Independence Day, because again, now if you're a sports fan, doesn't matter what sport you are, everyone knows International Fight Week. Everyone knows that the UFC is really going to put on their biggest card that weekend, and that's again what they've done here, and I think it's great. And Ray Sefo's no idiot. He knew, hey, let's capitalize on what the UFC has already built here, and he's jumped in on it. And again, he's no idiot. He's not trying to compete with the UFC. He's trying to lead in to the UFC, and there's no better way to do things than the Saturday afternoon matinee. And then for all you people in Florida, you have the race right afterwards, right? Isn't it right? See, so he's double dipping. He is straight pimping it. He knows what he's doing, and for all of this is great for MMA. And I cannot wait for this weekend, because again, we have the pay-per-view, and then we have the tough finale. And again, I hated waiting this long, but the UFC set this up perfectly, because now everybody's interested in the tough finale. They're going to throw that on Sunday when nothing else is going on, when everyone is actually just kicking back and relaxing from the ass-kicking weekend they just had. Perfect. They're going to destroy ratings. This is perfect for them. A question was brought to the MMA Corner when it was first announced that Chael and Vanderlei weren't going to be fighting, and Vitor had stepped in. And then when that fight was officially off, a lot of people were asking us how quickly until the UFC pulls Frankie Edgar and BJ Penn and throws them on the pay-per-view card and does something else with the Sunday card. And the one thing I stuck to is if they do that, they would kill themselves in the ratings, because the only fight, well, I can't say the only fight, but the main fight that everyone's going to be tuning in Sunday night, the one that's going to drive the ratings, is BJ Penn and Frankie Edgar. So not moving that fight, keeping it where it's at, is perfect for what they're trying to do. I think it's great. All right, Trey, give us your final thoughts.
It's just, it's a great time of year to be a sports fan. You know what? I'll go ahead and say it. It kind of stinks. We're in the dog days of summer, but this year we've got the World Cup. We've got MMA with a huge weekend coming up, and it's helping fill the void that is left in my heart. Football season's gone. The NHL playoffs are over. The NBA playoffs are over. We had the draft in both of them this past weekend. So it's time for, there's a lot of shows coming up here for the UFC. It's time for, the UFC to step up to the plate, and we're going to see how much MMA has grown, if this, oversaturation thing is true or false. The UFC is to a point where if they are as big as Dana White says they are, if they are really going to enter in the mainstream, this time period from the end of June to the end of August, when football season really ramps up, this is going to be a time period that MMA should really take advantage of in the future. And we're going to see how much, with ESPN and other sports stations, how much coverage MMA gets. We've got World Series of Fighting, the little promotion that could on big NBC. This is a time that we should see MMA in the forefront, and I just really hope that we do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, Trey, you're a hockey guy. How many games are in a hockey season?
82. Isn't it the same as basketball? Isn't it 82 for both?
82. Yeah. Now, you're also a baseball guy, right? How many? Well, kind of. Yeah. You're a sports guy, so
I'm a sports guy. Yeah.
Baseball is America's pastime, right? Or that's what they say. I'm a firm believer that football is yes, by far and away America's sport. There's no question about that. But we'll go with baseball as America's pastime. Everybody loves it. There are organizations. There's 162 games. 62, yeah. 162 games. There are some organizations, like I'm a huge Royals fan. I grew up watching George Brett. I live in Denver, Colorado. I'm an old man. When I was growing up, we didn't have the Rockies. I think I was either a junior or a senior in high school when we finally got the Rockies. So when I was growing up, you had the Royals and the Cubs. Love them both. But huge Royals fan. Grew up watching George Brett. I actually went to a Royals game last summer, and there was less than 1,500 people in the stadium. Now, where I'm going with it is this: if baseball, America's pastime, can still survive with a lot of teams in that same ballpark where they're only getting 2,000-3,000 people in the stands for each game. Is the UFC really oversaturating everything? Think of 162 baseball games, and even watching baseball in person, it gets real boring real quick. So
Yeah.
I don't think the UFC is oversaturating anything. I'm a firm believer that if the NFL was on 52 weeks a year, people would watch it 52 weeks a year because everyone loves football. If the UFC is putting on quality fights 52 weeks a year, everyone's going to watch it. It has nothing to do with being oversaturated. People bitch and moan about oversaturation when the quality of the product declines. Keep giving people quality fights, and you're not oversaturating anything. And really, what goes along with that is proper matchmaking. And I love Joe Silva, I love Sean Shelby. I think they're great at it. But with all of when you have a roster of 800 fighters, it's all about matchmaking at that time and putting the proper opponents together so you have exciting fights, and you can do so 52 weeks a year. So I look forward to what they're doing. I look forward to next week, and I think it's great. All right, guys, that is our show. We will be back next Sunday to do the MMA Corner News Show. It is 12 p.m. Mountain Time, 2 o'clock on the East Coast, and 11 a.m. on the West Coast. We will also be back Thursday night to give you our breakdown and predictions for both UFC 175 as well as the TUF finale. Then we will be back Saturday night to give you the breakdown of all the fights. We'll also be back Sunday night to give you a breakdown of all the fights. In the meantime, if you're like me and just can't get enough MMA news, go to the MMAcorner.com, your home for all things MMA. We have the most up-to-date MMA news out there. If you missed anything from the past weekend, check it out. Between Trey Downey and Rob Tatum, two of the best in the business, all of the post-fight recaps are up. All of the video highlights are up. So get your asses over and check that stuff out. For Trey Downey, I'm Josh Davis. Keep living the MMA Corner lifestyle. Peace.